In Western culture, patriarchy has been the social norm of society for a very long time. In these societies of patriarchy, men are typically the dominant gender that take on roles of leadership and power.
Patriarchal societies have many effects on the men and women that inhabit the system. Having men hold the power in these societies directly diminishes and withholds the power and ability of women. Therefore, it can be said that women are given a disadvantage in life simply by existing within the system. But what about the men in these cultures and societies? What negatives exist for men in societies that empower them over others?
To investigate and understand the negative effects of the patriarchal system on men, we'll share narratives of men in these societies and discuss how we are affected. In comparison with these narratives, we'll be sharing quotes from an article by Forbes magazine that emphasizes some of the reasons why we still live in a patriarchal society today.
In the article, Renowned Therapist explains the crushing effects of patriarchy on men and women today by Kathy Caprino. She talks to therapist Terry Real, who is a member of the senior facility at the Family Institute of Cambridge and the director of Gender Relations Program at the Meadows Institute in Arizona. Real states that the prominent reasons for why patriarchy is still alive today in our society is because of the divide between men and women held in contempt and men always valued, and in a situation between a man and a woman, the man is normally considered right. Each of us here today will talk about our own experiences with patriarchy and how we have seen it in our own lives growing up.
The negative effects on women that exist within a patriarchal society and culture can be seen more prevalently as they are the ones that are put in a direct disadvantage, and our society has been making a lot of progress as of recent to help limit and change that disadvantage. However, it is rarely ever talked about how the patriarchy has a negative impact on men. This is because within a patriarchal society, men are the ones that hold the power. But this alleged power has many negative side effects that can be draining to both our mental and physical health. As Terry Real says in Kathy Caprino's Forbes article, the patriarchy was designed for a purpose. However, these purposes don't include vital things such as happiness and intimacy with others. Ever since I was a young boy, I was always told to tough it up and man up during times of hardship, and I always would. And I know this experience is not limited to myself, as all boys are taught to be tough during times of difficulty and that we should repress all of our emotions. These phrases seem harmless at first, but what they truly do is set the precedent that men are not allowed to, or at least shouldn't reach out to others for help. The way they say that men never ask for directions when they are lost is almost a metaphor for men never seeking help when in trouble. I am no exception to this philosophy, as I hate telling people how I truly feel, and it's something I'm trying to fix about myself, but it is a difficult thing to do for myself and others like me. This issue is something very close to me, as severe anxiety, depression, and unfortunately even suicide has been a reality for my family, and this poor mental health issue is linked to not seeking help. In the United States, men are far more likely to commit suicide. In fact, according to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, men are over 3 times more likely to commit suicide compared to their female counterparts. Personally, although I do have this difficulty sharing my feelings, I am lucky to have plenty of resources to help me through difficult times. My father, someone who I greatly look up to, is the president of a suicide prevention organization, and he constantly preaches to me that even if I feel as if I have nobody to turn to, there are always ways that myself and others can get help. And if there's one single thing that I can get somebody to take away from my message, is that you can't let the patriarchy fool you. Being a man doesn't simply mean being a robot and repressing your emotions. That's simply just inhumane. Get the help you need and be willing to help others. Engaging in meaningful dialogue can truly be life-saving. Stepping outside of your own comfort zone can be incredibly difficult, but it is the first step in the right direction that can lead to lasting and meaningful change.
Within the Black community, there are often very quote-unquote traditional notions about gender, sexuality, and family dynamics. As a Black man growing up, I have experienced and observed the imposition of very patriarchal ideas and behaviors. It was the norm for men and women to embrace the idea that men should be more aggressive than women, should expect to be the head of the home, and should not feel or express sadness and fear. Men certainly should not cry or display that kind of emotion. I heard a lot of people saying to young boys, quote, man up, stop crying, or don't act like a little girl, close quote. As therapist and author Terry Real so accurately put it in the Forbes article, The Crushing Effects of Patriarchy on Men and Women Today, quote, traditionally, men are supposed to be strong and feel independent, unemotional, logical, and confident. Women are supposed to be expressive, nurturing, weak, and dependent, close quote. He succinctly describes the patriarchy that defines commonly held gender roles in our society. These ideas were certainly reinforced in the community I grew up in. It was always odd to me because in my home, my mother and grandmother were very strong figures, making many important decisions in spite of my father's presence as the quote-unquote head of the household. Furthermore, I have an older sister who's very bright and athletic, so all the talk about men as superior athletes and heads of the household didn't seem to reflect the actual experience in my life. However, I learned very early that this was a role expected of me and other boys. It informed the way I understood the differences between boys and girls. It has been work for me to change those influences I have from such an early time in my life. I certainly have many examples of strong, intelligent, accomplished women in my life. I've seen in my own life experiences that both men and women can be delicate and fragile, as well as strong and stoic. Intellectually, I understand that different kinds of people come from different experiences and identities. Men and women inhabit all kinds of personalities and ways of expressing emotion. However, it takes work to fight the impulse to make assumptions when you grew up being taught that those impulses were true. I'm putting in the work of educating myself and interacting with people from diverse backgrounds, interests, and lifestyles. Through coursework, dialogue, and interaction, I've been learning to see people as they are and not through the lens of preconception. I'm also trying to model different behavior for the young people coming after me. I want them to see examples of men who express feelings and support them when they need to express theirs. It takes work to change the ideas that you were taught from an early age and to work at being a more expressive and vulnerable man. I am also glad to see that American society is changing in the way we see gender roles. As Terry Real mentioned in the Forbes article, we are seeing different examples of manhood that include men expressing emotion, sadness, and vulnerability. He specifically mentioned 9/11 and how during that sad time, we saw strong men like police officers and firefighters weeping openly. It is one of the saddest chapters in our history, but it was important for us as a nation to begin to see that men can be strong and also vulnerable and emotional. We are also seeing more and more examples of strong women in leadership roles that dispel the idea that women are weak or need to be cared for. I'm happy to see the changes in our society that will make it easier for boys and girls and women and men to be themselves without having to fit into patriarchal ideas about who they should be. Terry Real ends the Forbes article with powerful advice for what we can all do to free ourselves from these patriarchal shackles. Most notably, he instructs us to, quote, insist on relationality in your boys, insist on strengthening your girls, and insist on wholeness in your relationship with each other, and insist on wholeness inside yourself. You can be a man and cry. You can be a woman and speak up. We can step outside the frame of patriarchy. We don't have to be determined by it. I am challenging myself to learn more, to listen to others more, and to think critically about myself more. I hope you all will too. Thank you. And now Jason will share his experiences.
Patriarchy in our society has embedded itself into our mindsets to have a patriarchal perspective on both issues for men and women. For men, it has a lot more mental and internal impacts and more noticeable traits, specifically men's outlook on vulnerability and expressing their feelings. All my life, I've always been more sensitive emotionally, and to this day, I still feel shame or embarrassment when I show my true feelings about my issues. My father told me when I was a child that I cried too much and that it wasn't manly to cry over small things. Since then, I had believed that if I cried or got sensitive on a topic, I wasn't man enough and I was weak. This toxic masculinity mindset challenged me deeply because I'm a person to normally express my feelings, and if it upsets me, I want to show it and not brush it aside. In the article, Renowned Therapist Explains the Crushing Effects of Patriarchy on Men and Women Today by Kathy Caprino, she talks to therapist Terry Real, and he states, "The old rules were built for stability, for production, and consumption. Intimacy? I don't think so. Happiness? No. It was about buckle up and do your job." My father was a part of that generation that didn't have to worry about feelings and what is conflicting with a man in our society. His priorities were to work hard and to provide for himself and his family. This is an outdated way of life because our generation and society doesn't operate how traditionally things were, and there is more focus on understanding feelings and emotions and not pushing them aside. The internal conflict I had with myself always made me question my worth as a man in this society and if I was capable enough to achieve success. Our society forces men to close themselves off to understanding and expressing their emotions to others, and then they tend to hold in everything that is troubling them and create more stress and pressure for themselves. Men who close themselves off to emotions then have a harder time being in relationships with women and are dismissive towards their partner's feelings or concerns. This also creates a mindset that women are weaker than men because they show their emotions too much. If a woman were to have an angry outburst in public setting, they would be viewed as too aggressive or inappropriate for showing their true emotions, and it is viewed as strongly unprofessional. The shame that is forced onto men and women for expressing their inner emotions is a reason why our society is still stuck in a patriarchy. People are put down and their voices are silenced to protect traditional views created by men in favor of men. Gender norms are hardly stereotyped today, and if men or women don't conform to this necessary assumption, they are viewed as outsiders and shamed or viewed as inferior. In order to remove patriarchy not just in our society but for future generations, it has to be done by the people and not by our government. How we handle our interactions with men and women and our views towards them should not be based on what bias people consider is right or wrong. I wish I was more open to my feelings prior in my life because being able to express them and having a voice makes me feel heard and validated, and everyone deserves that right.
What exists in the United States today is a deep divide between men and women, an abyss that continues to widen and deepen when interaction, communication, and unification of the genders continue to split further and further apart. The patriarchy in which we have conducted our lives in, and in which we have allowed to be held over us since the founding fathers came to the Americas, has been daunting and untouched. It is as cursed and defining of the United States as colonialism or imperialism. We've inherently, and oftentimes unknowingly, continued to separate the roles of men and women, and the aftermath is a generation who know not what it takes to be a human, but only what it takes to be our gender. We have placed molds on each and every one of our children before they can even determine who they want to be, what they want to like, or what they want to invest their passions into. The molding affects them in every way imaginable. In a patriarchal system, we see this molding play a big role in the concepts of misogyny and masculinity. As renowned therapist Terry Real says in an interview with Forbes, misogyny and masculinity are flip sides of the same coin. What it takes to be a man today is to not be a girl. The contempt for the feminine is part of the patriarchal culture. In other words, the patriarchal system has created a belief among men that feminism is somehow lesser than masculinity. What men inherently embrace and nurture suppresses and demotes women's roles, women empowerment, and their true worth. And it is with that I would like to leave you guys with a poem. A letter to Barbie from Ken. From your lesser to my greater, I was made after you, to bask in your celestial and cosmic light and glory. I yearned to be just 1% of you, to bask in the infiniteness of your story. It is your ambition and courage that I will be the kindness and softness to you. From your minor to my major, you set the precedent for me to follow. From woman to man, I seek to be your standard. You are the different for me to embrace. From man to woman, I seek to take on your slander. It is to your superiority and power that will be the emotional and sentimental pillars to you. From separates to ours, we were made to be great, to tower over our expectations and fates. We were made to collaborate, to build a better tomorrow. It is never too late. It is to your everything that I will be your anything.
That concludes this episode of the podcast. I sincerely believe the topic of patriarchy is a vital and important part of understanding the society and culture that we live in.
Moreover, it's a topic that will require a lot of devotion of time, energy, and effort into bettering. As men, we should look to break down the barriers set upon women and take bigger roles in the fight for women's rights, equal pay, accessibility to feminine hygiene products, domestic violence awareness, human trafficking, and so on.
And I deeply agree with Ryan. More than that, we need to remove the expectations, roles, responsibilities, and the overall rigid structure of feminism and masculinity.
Exactly. It is important to note that there aren't concepts that strictly apply to specific genders, but things that we need to embrace and nurture our knowledge in. It is okay to be male and feminine, and it is okay to be female and masculine. We should define what we want to be, not resort to petty and false expectations of misogynistic and male-dominant society.
We leave here today in hopes that we will be trailblazers for change and unity, the trailblazers for both men and women. And we can begin in dismantle and nurture a society in which we can truly be equal.
Can you repeat that, David? You cut out.
We leave here today in hopes that we will be trailblazers for change and unity. The trailblazers for we leave here today in hopes that we will be trailblazers for change and unity. The trailblazers for both men and women. And we can begin in educating, learning, and facing all the problems that plague us as human beings. We must not only create, but dismantle and nurture a society in which we can truly be equal.